The biggest problem is that they don't plan. They don't run their business on paper. They don't write a business plan, create strategic plans, create contingency plans, put together personnel manuals and marketing materials, and they make a nice brochure. But at the end of the day, you have to deal with customers in writing. You got to deal with partners in writing. You have to deal with vendors in writing, for the most part.
Mitch, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you.
Thanks, Solomon. I appreciate it.
You and I have been talking about all kinds of things when it relates to entrepreneurs, estate planning. I was like, all right, Mitch, we got to do a podcast because, like I said, I deal with entrepreneurs every day. You deal with lawsuits and cases. And so I was going to ask you right out of the gate, what is the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make as it relates to estate planning?
Well, a lot of times people, and people do this in general, they don't really take the time to plan to write their wills and have trusts in place and have agreements. One of the biggest mistakes that business owners make is that they don't account for the fact that their business is something that has value that is part of their estate plan. So you find a lot of times where a spouse, for example, a surviving spouse, will get shut out of bank accounts that get frozen because they didn't plan for those kind of contingencies, either putting them on the bank account or making them a member or whatever, planning for it. And then they spend the next several months trying to get access. And maybe a lot of the cash flow of their business or of their life came through that business. If they have partners, so if they're an entrepreneur and they have partners that they work with, which is often the case, they don't do any of that planning. So, one person needs to continue with the business. The other person, I don't know, he wants his family to get bought out or whatever. And they don't do those things. They don't put buy-sell agreements in place. They don't put even insurance products in place. They don't have provisions to deal with all those contingencies because they just think it's never going to happen with them. So usually,
never going to happen. Yes, we're just going to keep on living. And entrepreneurs not planning, that is so unlikely. We're such great planners, Mitch. Come on.
Of course, we're right brain. All the entrepreneurs are right brain. They want to be creative. And they don't pay attention. Look, that's one of the problems I was mentioning to you, that my book that just came out, which is a business book, doesn't really focus on estate planning. It focuses on the 10 things that business owners do wrong or should focus on to avoid ending up in court, things like that, right? The biggest problem is that they don't plan. They don't run their business on paper. They don't write a business plan, create strategic plans, create contingency plans, put together personnel manuals and marketing materials, and they make a nice brochure. But at the end of the day, you have to deal with customers in writing. You got to deal with partners in writing. You have to deal with vendors in writing. For the most part, if you own a grocery store, obviously everybody buying groceries, you're going to sign a contract. But you need to do that stuff because then when there are misunderstandings and there are disagreements, you need to have those mechanisms in place to deal with them so they're not so disruptive, so they don't end up in court, so they don't cost you a lot of money and don't put you out of business, which happens a lot. So that's a common, and it's a flow through. So they don't do the estate planning as part of that. Yeah.
I appreciate that. First of all, thank you for what you do for entrepreneurs out there, because I can see how this is so important because I have businesses with partners, right? And I can already see that they're going to be like, oh man, here we go. Because we always put it off for later. Always put it off for later. There's never a good time.
And I come into more situations where they're disagreeing now. One of them wants to leave the business. They don't want to be partners anymore. And they don't have these things in place. And they're arguing over everything from pictures on Instagram to spoons and forks and knives and bowls and printers and everything in the office. It becomes a mess. And it just comes down to who's got more money. So if you got more money, you can screw your partner because you got nothing in writing. And he's just got to take it because he can't afford to get legal counsel or have this thing drag it out a long time.
Wow. Yeah. All right. So that is a serious problem. I can understand that. Let's talk about the solution, because I think I like to be part of the solution. Mitch, where do you think they start? Where does it start? What's the first step?
So the first step is let's start with a solopreneur, right? One person, and we'll deal with partners in a second.
Sure.
So if you're a solopreneur, you start out, like you said, right brain, you're very excited, you don't do any planning, and you got this great idea. You need to start putting things in writing. Notes that will become a business plan, a strategic plan, things that allow you to see obstacles down the road. Because that's what happens when you don't put things in writing. All of a sudden it creeps up on you. You're like, what? What happened? Why are we not making any money? Maybe your product's wrong. I don't know what you did wrong. So you need to get in the habit very early on to start doing things in writing. And then as you grow your business, anyone you deal with, customers, vendors, eventually partners. You do those things in writing. You put down what your agreements are. What are the return policies? What are the warranty policies? What are the terms with the vendors? Or maybe you're a vendor or whatever happens to be. So you avoid these problems, because there will be misunderstandings. It's just the question. It's just nature, the natural course of things, the way we work as human beings. In the book, I interviewed a memory expert.
Okay.
Our minds are not like these file cabinets. Very few of us are these file cabinets where everything gets put nice and neat in different places. We can just pull it out and read it. Our minds are boxes with things that are all mixed up. There's sticky notes in there. They're attached to the wrong things. You think one's related to something else, and it's not usually. So if you don't start those habits and you're not sharp when it comes to keeping track of things like that, you will forget. You can't rely on your memory to, and people do that. That's would avoid a lot of these problems if you start by doing it. Now, I'm not suggesting you do it alone. You should get a competent attorney to help you write contracts and things like that, but you should deal with that sooner or later, sooner than later.
So first step, write it down.
Yeah.
What's the next step?
Well, that would be a lot of steps. So write it down with a business plan, write it down with clients, create a customer contract, create a partnership agreement, create a contingency plan if someone dies or becomes disabled or just wants to walk away from the business, what happens. And it may be different in the first year than it is in year 10. I don't know. All those types of things. Create a process, a sales process for your business that accommodates a contract. I get a lot of people tell me, I'm talking to people, I'm talking to Solomon, I'm trying to sell him whatever the service I offer, and then I'm just going to like whip out a contract and say, hey, Solomon, by the way, can you just sign this?
Right.
No, that's not, even the term whipping it out is not, they're uncomfortable. So you need to create a process that is comfortable for you, that seems professional, because by the way, professional people do things in writing. People that aren't professional and aren't running a sharp business are not doing it in writing. So you're not getting contracts from people. If you went into an auto dealership and you wrote them a check and they gave you the keys, you'd look at them like you had three heads. Or you bought your house and there's no paperwork involved. Right? So professionals do business that way. And there's some industries that require it, a lot that don't. You have to create that sales process that makes it comfortable and natural for the client to sign the contract, have some time to review it, however it works, and know the laws that go with that. Same with vendors. Don't let people sell you stuff and just drop it off at your store, at your shop, your place of business, and you don't have anything in writing. Because wait till you open it up and there's a problem.
No, then
solve a lot of the problems in terms of running your business. Then if you get sued, you call me, I'll send you to a litigator. I don't litigate.
The next step is, when do we, as entrepreneurs, we're living by, I don't know, it's like literally clients dictate every minute, right? Like you're always busy. Unfortunately, most of us are still owner operators, if that makes sense. So we're always running the business. Yeah, we're entrepreneurs, but operators. When do you recommend they start moving into some of these strategic planning, buy-sell agreements, or even that you talked about, like estate planning? What happens to the bank account and adding your wife as the member in your whatever Secretary of State, like all these things.
Right.
What do you recommend for that entrepreneur who is more busy closing the business, paying the bills, payroll, and everything else? And there you are, Mitch, talking about this stuff.
Yeah, because it's not exciting. They get excited. They want to do all the exciting stuff. Strategic planning, let's call it writing a business plan, or whatever you want to call it. Could be one page. I don't care. It should really be done like almost from the get-go. Right? As soon as you have an idea, you think it wants to be more than a hobby, you should start strategically planning how you're going to grow this business in all the different parts. There's a lot, you've seen business plan templates, 10, 8, 12 parts, whatever. There's 4 basic ones, right? There's your service or your product, if you're a product or service company. There's your people that you use to run the business. Maybe it's you, maybe it's not. And that's a lot where you start figuring out, how can I become the person who's not going and sweeping the floors every day? There's the marketing side of it, marketplace and marketing side. And there's the financials. Like if you do those 4 things from the get-go, you'll start to develop what looks like a business, right? Yep. The buy-sell stuff probably could wait a little down the road, maybe 18 months to 2 years, because if something happened in the first, there's probably not much to argue over.
Yeah, there's not much to split over.
Right, but if business takes off and things really start going, you should address it sooner than later.
Got it.
With regard to your estate plan, that's more situational, right? If you're starting a business, you're not married, you don't have a spouse, you don't even have kids, maybe you don't have, maybe you give somebody a power of attorney who can take over your business account if you have to, or things like that. But as you grow your family, things like that, and people that you have to worry about, then yeah, you want to make sure you have somebody maybe added to your company with access to the bank accounts if they need it. And don't just adding somebody as a signator doesn't necessarily work. If the bank finds out that you died, they're going to still freeze the account. So that doesn't help. You could have a resolution that says, hey, if I die, Solomon takes over as the president of the company to figure out what we're going to do with the business. You can do those types of things. Create like a board of contingency board of directors, board of advisors. I love advisory board, by the way. Big advocate of that. And that's probably the time frame you're looking at. So the estate planning is more situational. If just you, always good to have a will, not necessary. If you have children, if you have a spouse, definitely time to start thinking about it. Healthcare directives, estate planning, maybe some trusts, things that line up with your business. Yeah.
Fast forward, you start the business, you're 22 years old, then you get married, you got some kids. What's the first step? Call Mitchell.
If you don't have much in the bank, I'd go buy some life insurance. That's the first thing I would do.
Love
just
that.
In case, right? Because people do it the other way around. They go get their wills and they wait and they don't buy life insurance. So if you die, the will might help me, but it's not going to help your family. So that's what I would do, right? Get some term insurance, whatever, have it in place. And then as you build your wealth, you deal with that down the road. Then you get a will, especially if you have children or you're planning on having kids, pick some guardians, do some things like that. If you have a business that's running your business, you also want not a guardian, but a power holder to take over. Mm-hmm. And you can do that either through a resolution with the company or through your will, different ways to do that. But yeah, that's how I would start the process of getting things in place.
Is this all covered in your book?
No, my book's called 10 Ways to Get Sued by Anyone and Everyone, a small business owner's guide to staying out of court. And in the book, in the 10 chapters, and there's 2 bonus chapters about, I think, arbitration and litigation, I've interviewed, some of it's my stuff, but I've also interviewed a lot of other attorneys that practice in other areas, divorce, employment law, harassment and sexual harassment and discrimination, insurance. We interviewed an insurance expert in there. I mentioned the memory expert. So it's a lot of compilation. It's more of a guide for the business owner.
Got it.
To run the business and to do the right things from the beginning, because I come in usually when there's problems.
I want to get a copy of that. Where can we get that? Amazon?
Amazon. Just use 10 ways to get sued and you'll find the book. I can
and
send you.
And also, Mitch, you have your own podcast. Do you mind sharing?
I do. Yeah.
Yes.
I have a podcast. It's called The Accidental Entrepreneur. You can get it on any of the podcast directories or YouTube. I've been interviewing people for 4.5 years now. We've done 300 and some odd episodes. Met very interesting and impressive people from throughout the world. People that started with nothing, might have come to this country with nothing but the shirt on their back, worked their way up, and eventually bought their company. I've had people raise capital and sell their company for a lot of money. And I've had people that have had a lot of successes and failures along the way, and they share their thoughts and their ideas and their advice. And it's a little therapeutic for me too, because I like to meet people.
I can see that. That's what I was going to say. How did an attorney decide to go into content marketing?
I think every attorney should go into content marketing, right? I think it's just a question of what content you want to write. So you do it too, right? So you got to create content in order to create authority to get people to follow you, get Google reviews, deal with your clients. I get not a lot of my business that way, but I get some of it. More of it is like they see me on your show or they listen to one of my episodes. They tell their friends this, that, and the business owner calls me. That's more how it happens. But I don't know. One day I was like, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I think I heard a video or saw a video or heard a podcast that said you can start your own podcast I'm like, don't you need like a sound engineers and a big studio, whatever? So it was like $75. It had a list of equipment, which was junky equipment. And it's terrible if you listen to the earlier episodes. And I got started and I didn't know what I was going to do. We were going to do just about law. And then somebody told me that's boring. So I brought in a good friend of mine who has since passed away, actually. And he was on my first and my 100th episode. And he just sat with me for 2 or 3 hours telling his whole story about where he grew up and where he went to school. Turns out we went to the same high school, 40 years apart, but we did. And and it became 2 episodes. It was so long. And I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to interview people, tell their stories, ask them questions along the way so they can share their knowledge and help other people get a hold of their business and maybe avoid some of their mistakes. And that's what we've been doing.
That's awesome.
Beginning. So please, tune in and listen to whatever episodes you like. There's all kinds of neat people on there.
Where can we find you, Mitch?
Beinhackerlaw.com is my firm's website. I'm also on LinkedIn, Facebook, I guess Instagram. The Instagram and the other ones just post up the podcasting things automatically. But definitely on LinkedIn is probably the best way to connect with me online, or go to the website. We have all kinds of good material on there, some blog articles, link to the podcast episodes, stuff like that. So, but you got to
Absolutely.
if you're going to grow any kind of business, you have to become a content marketer. And you can write blogs if you want to. You can do a podcast. You can whatever you want to do, but do it.
So inspirational coming from somebody who's not a marketer, like by trade. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Mitch. Thanks for hanging out with us.
All right. Thanks, Solomon.